Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to NextDoorNetAdmin. I've been doing a little bit of scripting this week, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the problem that I'm facing and then how I'm planning on addressing it. So, right now, the goal that I have is to find every computer where a user has logged in, because the users at this particular client have a bad habit of logging in, locking the screen, and then walking away. And when they walk away, fast user switching takes over. Somebody else clicks switch user, signs in, and now they're the active user, but the other person is still signed in. And then they go to another computer and another computer and another computer, and they never sign out. We need to find every instance where a user has signed in, even where they are not the current user. Everywhere where they have a disconnected session open. I'm going to say right up front, I know there's lots of different ways of dealing with this. I'm going to show you how I've dealt with it. I don't say that this is the only way to do it. I'm sure there are some easier ways. This is just the way that I've chosen. So, our tools will tell you who the active user is or who the last user was, but it doesn't give you a good readout of all the user sessions. I know that there are tools to do this. If you open command prompt and type in query user, or if you run the executable queue user, same thing. If you do query user, it'll give you a list of who all's logged into that computer. It tells you a few other things too, like when they were logged in, whether the session is active or disconnected, how long it's been idle for. It'll tell you whether it's on the console or whether it's connected through RDP. And if it's through RDP, it'll tell you which TCP session it's on. Particularly useful if you've got a terminal server where multiple people are connecting by RDP at once. So I know that there's a tool in Windows that can give you this readout. How do I get a list of that from every computer on the network? The first thing I did was whip out PowerShell, and I've coded this up now, and I'm just going to walk you through it so you can follow my logic on this. First up, this does require run as administrator, because not only do I want to get a report of where the user is logged in, I also want the ability to be able to run this and log the user off every session where they're disconnected. And to do that, I'm going to need administrator rights. So just requires run as administrator. Cool. Parameters. I'm going to do one for mode, with choices being locate or log off. And I'm going to have a parameter for the username that I'm looking for or trying to log off. Cool. I'm going to have a log path that's going to be located in a given directory on a server somewhere. And then the actual program part, the meat of the script, goes, okay, so let's run query user. And I'm going to skip the first line because the first line is just the titles in the columns. Cool. And then I'm going to select my log file by just calling it after the username. If I'm looking for user A, I'll just call it usera.log. Easy enough. And then for the results of query user, I'm going to break it down. Somebody, honestly, online already did the hard work of figuring out this particular expression. I did have to modify it a little bit, but this works. And then your matched sections of each line get trimmed and stored in these variables. So we're going to have a section for the username, a section for the session ID. Oop, I don't want to do that. Thank you. A section for the session ID. That's poorly worded because we've got the session right here. It's this 18 character section. The ID is it's still really session ID is the best name that I have for it, but it's the logon session, I suppose, rather than the connection session. Imprecise language. I really apologize for that. The state, however, is where we either get active or idle, or not idle, excuse me. It's going to be active or disk for disconnected. If it is active and it is idle, that's this section here. And then the logon time is the time when they logged on. Most of this information I'm not going to do anything with. Really, what I'm just going to look at is, okay, is the user that we just pulled out of query user, is that the user that I'm looking for? If it is, if I'm trying to log them off and they are disconnected, then I'm going to command log off of their desktop session number. And then the script is going to exit because I'm done. If their session is active, it will not forcibly log them off. And if I'm just trying to locate them, then in either of those cases, this other section runs, where I get the date and time when the script is running, and then I'm going to write to my log file here. I'm going to just say, this is the computer name. It is active or disconnected at this time. And I'm just going to spit that into the log file. Then I should be able to go to my log directory, open the log file for the username, and I'll get a list of all the computer names where they are either logged in because I was just looking for them, or where they are still logged in and active if I was trying to log them off. And if they're on there actively, then I'm going to go to those stations and ask them politely to log out rather than force dumping their session while they're actually trying to work on it, because that's kind of rude. That does not win you any favors. Cool. So I've got this script. What do we do with it? Well, we're going to have to run it somehow on those stations, right? I could maybe make this a scheduled task and have it run every time somebody signs on to the computer, but I want to be able to run this on demand. So how am I going to do that? Well, the next thing that I'm going to try running is this line right here. I'm going to use a tool called PSExec, Process Exec. It is a sysinternals tool. It is now, published by Microsoft itself, so it's a valid tool to use. Sometimes it gets highlighted by various antivirus or anti-malware programs, including Windows Defender, interestingly enough, as potentially unwanted applications, or PUAs. It's potentially unwanted because it's a very powerful piece of software from Microsoft. It's small, and it allows you to run programs on remote computers, which means that it can also be used by hackers and other malfeasants out there. So it is a known tool. It is a good tool, but if you're downloading it yourself, you may get a positive or an alert from antivirus or whatever you've got running, understandably so, but it's still good. I want to run it on a list of workstations. It used to have the ability to just run on everything in the domain. You can do it on, double backslash computer if you want a single computer. You used to be able to do that, and it would enumerate the entire domain and run itself on everything. But unfortunately, that functionality doesn't seem to work anymore so much. So we now have we're going to have to provide a file with just a list of computer names in order to be able to have it run on all of those computers. And the rest of it is fairly simple. -I means run it in an interactive session. That's important. I tried running my script in a non-interactive session and it didn't work. So this is how you make it work. In my case, make it interactive. Okay. Run it as this user. I'm going to run it as an administrator account because I need it to be able to run as a user for a couple reasons. One, if I run it without explicitly specifying a username, it runs with impersonation, which means that when it runs on the remote computer, it doesn't have the ability to access the network. But I want it to access the network because I want it to write to a central log file. So I have to make sure that I run this as an administrator user because I also want the script to run as an administrator in case I want it to log somebody off. So this has to be an administrator account and I have to specify it. The actual command is this part. This first part is just ps-exec. This part here is the actual command. I'm going to invoke PowerShell using the option execution policy bypass because this is not a signed script. It is not remote signed. It is not regularly signed. And I don't want to change the execution policy on all of these client workstations to unrestricted. That's a bad idea. So when I invoke PowerShell, I'm going to provide the on-the-spot runtime execution policy of bypass just for this one. And I'm going to point it at the file find active user.ps1. It's going to be stored centrally on the network so that I don't have to push it as a duplicate copy to every single workstation out there. And I'm going to do mode locate user username. I could just as easily go mode log off with a different username. That would be fine too. Okay. But then how do I get the list of all the computer names in the domain that I want to run it to? How do I get this text file? That's this last part, which is a big thing. I'm going to actually break this line up a little bit so that we can talk about these pieces separately. Because there's quite a lot here. All right. So the middle part is the most important part, but let's start at the top. For this parameter means we're going to use backticks to specify the command that we're going to run. Otherwise, it would have problems with these double quote marks. So use backquote, tokens equals 1, and I'm running this directly on the command line. If this was in a batch file, I would need to double the % there, but if I'm running it on the command file, just 1 is fine. So for every line of output from this command, we're going to echo whatever comes out of it into this particular file. So what's this huge command? What all is in this? And tokens equals 1 means we're just going to take the first token on the line. That'll be important in a minute. So ds query, directory services query. I'm going to run this on a computer that has Active Directory tools installed so that I have this utility. ds query star. It is possible to specifically run ds query computer, but if you run ds query computer, you don't get the option to do a fancy filter like this. And I need the filter like this for reasons that I'll come to in a minute. So ds query star, all object types. I'm going to search for them in my OU of domain computers in my domain.local. The filter, this is an LDAP filter, and this is a nasty thing to try and figure out if you don't know what you're looking at. So let's actually take this filter, just that filter, and break it down bit by bit. I'm going to put that down here, okay? So all right. So on this first level, and means I need everything on this level to be valid. So, and object class equals computer. We're not looking for user accounts. We're not looking for groups. We're not looking for any. We're just looking for computers in Active Directory. Okay. And then we have this exclamation mark. That means not. So whatever we have here is going to be inverted. What we have here is user account control. Then we have an OID. And then this thing 2. What the heck does that mean? User account control is a parameter in LDAP that has a lot of bit flags in it. If you think of it in binary, you've got zeros and ones. Anytime there's a 0, that means that the flag is not set. Anytime you have a 1, it means the flag is set. And then you figure out which flags you're looking for by taking their position in binary and turning that into decimal. So in this case, if I'm looking for a flag with the value 2, I'm actually looking for a single bit that is in the position where you would have the number 2. If it's active, there's a 1 there, then it's the value 2. And if it's not active and it's 0, then it's not the value 2. You could have a bit in the number 8 position. If that's active, that's an 8. If you then have the bit in position 2 active, then you add those together and you get 10. And that just means that you've got flags in position 8 and position 2. I'm saying position, but these are actually the decimal values. 8 would be the 4th digit, regardless. So I'm looking for a flag in the 2nd position, decimal value 2, in the user account control. This nasty looking bit of business is apparently a special OID value that is specifically saying, I want you to compare this as a bitwise flag. And I need you to match this on all the values specified. So if I said 10, that breaks down to 8 and 2. If I said 11, that means 8, 2, and 1. All of them have to match. There's another value that you could use for OR. If I said 11, it would match on any of 8, 2, and 1, but they don't all have to be there at the same time. I'm using the AND operator because I'm really checking on the bit that is in number 2. And it turns out that the bit that translates to the decimal value 2 is the bit that says this account is disabled. So what I'm actually doing here in this nasty bit of filter is I am looking for everything that is a computer and is not disabled. If it's a disabled computer, that means it doesn't exist anymore. I'm not going to be able to run a command on it. I'm only looking for active computer accounts. And this is what lets me specify that in my query. So like I said, that's a bit of a brain blender if you don't understand what you're looking at. And certainly I didn't. I had to do a bunch of research to figure out how to do this. But there's a way to do it. Attributes. The attributes I'm looking for are the canonical name, the name of the computer, and the operating system. Limit 0. If you don't specify a limit, it only gives you 100 results by default. I've got well over 300 results that I need to get. I could do something like limit 999. That wouldn't be as extensible because if I ever go above 1,000, I'm only going to get 999. It's better to just say limit 0 and say, I want everything you got. Done. Okay, so I'm querying everything under domain computers. I'm filtering it so that I'm only getting computers that are not disabled, active computers. I'm getting the name of the computer and the operating system, and I want unlimited results. Cool. Then I have this wonderful little pipe character. The caret is an escape symbol, because if you don't escape the pipe symbol, it goofs up your command line. So you have to tell it, take this literally. I want you to put this into the command as an actual pipe. I'm going to find the string Windows. That's because I can have machines with different operating systems connected to Active Directory. For example, I can have an operating system of Mac OS X. Mac OS X is not where I want to be running my PowerShell script. You can run PowerShell on Mac, but it's not guaranteed to be built in like it is on current versions of Windows. Fine. So I only want the lines that are for Windows machines. Then I'm going to pipe this. In testing, I found out that I had some results that just came up as Windows Virtual Machine, but doesn't have an actual name. Those results would screw up my list, because when I get tokens equals 1, I'm going to get an entry that just has the name Windows. And I'm going to get 5 of those, because apparently there's 5 instances of that. That's not useful to me. So in this case, I'm going to say, now find the string, and this -v means to reverse it. So I'm only going to get lines that do not have virtual in it. And that's just because I happen to know that the string that is causing me problems is Windows Virtual Machine. So I'm going to get all of that, and then I'm going to pull out only the things that are running Windows. I'm going to filter out everything that is Windows Virtual Machine, and then I want to sort it alphabetically just because it's nice to do it that way and makes it a little easier for me to track where in the list I am, just by where are you in the alphabetical list, rather than have it all be in random order. Once that's done, then line by line, we're going to take the first token, which should be the canonical name, the name of the computer, and we're going to dump that in one at a time into the workstations.txt file. Now I have a list of all the computers in the domain that are Windows computers, active computers, and that are not Windows Virtual Machine. There are computers in there that are virtual machines. I don't know where this Windows Virtual Machine came from. So I haven't excluded all virtual machines, just the lines that would goof me up. I have all that list of all the computers in the domain. Now I can use psexec to run my script on all of these machines. And the script will use query user and match so that it can either report to me if I'm just trying to find them, or if they're on and active, or if they're disconnected and I want to log them off, it'll just log them off and exit. There you go. Piece by piece, step by step, we've addressed what we were looking for. We've got something that will do what I need it to do. Took a little bit of time to get there, but that's just the process of how you work this out. You say, I know how to do this part, so let's write something to do this part. Now I need to figure out this step, do this step. Now I need to figure out how to do this. Let's dig into this. And by the time you go through that process, the last piece that you really don't know how to do is where you can put more of your effort, rather than staring at the whole thing and going, Well, I guess I could do it with PowerShell remoting, but I don't know how to do PowerShell remoting, and I'm going to need to do up a group policy and have that roll out across the domain. And then I need to worry about firewalls, and it's step by step, do what you can, then figure out how to get over that next obstacle, and then keep going from there. That's basically it. Like I said at the very beginning, I know there's other ways to do this. PowerShell remoting is probably one of the ways that you can do this. It's just not the way that I chose. This is the way that I chose. So there you go. Hopefully that was interesting to you. Hopefully you learned something from it, or just enjoyed listening to me blather, I guess. I don't know. Whatever works for you. If you have thoughts on how I could have made this better, or thoughts on other things that you'd like to see me talk about or explain, feel free to let me know down in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your NextDoorNetAdmin, and we will see you next time.